America's biggest military base in the Middle East was hit. Not once, not twice. For 35 consecutive days, 10,000 American soldiers living under missile sirens at the very base where America's air war against Iran is being planned. And on day 3, Iranian bombers were 2 minutes away from changing everything. 2 minutes. What stopped them and what didn't is a story the world was never properly told until now. Welcome to the War 2 Signal, the channel where we don't just report the war, we read it. Now, if you've been with us for a while, you already know what we do here. But if this is your first time, do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button. Think of it this way, you wouldn't stop reading the newspaper halfway through a war, would you? This is your newspaper. Every single day, don't miss a single edition. And one more thing, drop in the comments. Where in the world are you watching this from today? We want to know exactly how far the War 2 signal is reaching. Now let's get into it. There's a piece of desert in the Middle East that America cannot afford to lose. It sits approximately 25 kilometers southwest of Doha, the capital of Qatar, surrounded by sand, surrounded by heat, and surrounded for the past 35 days by danger. Its name is Al Udeid Air Base. And if someone wanted to understand why this conflict looks the way it does today, they would have to start here, because everything, the planning, the strikes, the decisions, the coordination, everything runs through the single installation in the Qatari desert. Al Udeid is not simply a military base in the traditional sense. It is the forward deployed headquarters of the United States Air Force's Central Command. It is the location from which targeting decisions are made. It is the hub from which aircraft depart on missions and return from them. It is the center from which the entire intelligence and surveillance picture of the Gulf region is assembled, processed, and acted upon. Under normal conditions, approximately 10,000 American service members are stationed there at any given time. 10,000 people at one base in a country that shares a maritime border with Iran. And when the conflict began, when the United States launched Operation Epic Fury against Iran, Al Udeid was the brain behind it. Every bomber that took off toward Iranian territory, every strike package that was assembled, every pilot who received a mission briefing, it all originated from this base, which is precisely why Iran decided from the very first day that Al Udeid had to be targeted. To understand the Iranian logic, one has to step back and look at the bigger picture. For roughly 30 years, the United States military conducted its regional air campaigns from a position of complete safety. In Iraq in 2003, in Afghanistan, in Libya, in Syria, the bases from which American aircraft operated were untouchable. The adversaries in those conflicts did not have the reach, the weapons, or the capability to strike back at the infrastructure from which the strikes were coming. The bases were sanctuaries. The strikes went one way. That was the model. That was the doctrine. And for 3 decades it worked. Iran watched all of this carefully for years. And Iran built its military capabilities with one specific question in mind. What would it take to break that model? What would it take to ensure that if America ever came for Iran, the strikes would not simply go one way? The answer, Iran concluded, was a sustained and systematic campaign against the infrastructure of American power production in the Gulf. Not just the aircraft, not just the pilots, but the radars, the fuel systems, the command centers, the bases themselves, and the most important base of all, the one that had to be hit first, hit repeatedly, and hit hard, was Al Udeid. So on the 28th of February 2026, when the first wave of Iranian strikes was launched, Al Udeid was already on the target list. Smoke was reported rising from the direction of the base following Iranian strikes on Doha. It was the opening signal of a campaign that would continue without pause for 35 consecutive days. Wave after wave, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, one-way attack drones, manned bombers flying at low altitude to avoid radar detection. Combinations of all of these simultaneously designed to overwhelm, confuse, and eventually penetrate the layered defense systems protecting the base. Iran was not doing this randomly. Iran was doing this with a plan. And the plan, as the subsequent 35 days would reveal, was more sophisticated and more effective than the American public was ever officially told. 10,000 American service members are living today under conditions that include daily air raid sirens and the sound of explosions. At the largest American military base in the Middle East. At the nerve center of a war that was supposed to be short, decisive, and clean. It has been none of those things. And it all begins with what happened at Al Udeid. Most wars have a moment, a single moment buried inside the noise of headlines and official statements that tells you everything about what kind of war this actually is. For this conflict, that moment happened on the 2nd of March, 2026, Day 3. 2 Iranian Air Force Su-24 tactical bombers lifted off from Iranian territory and pointed themselves toward a single destination, Al-Udeid Air Base. They were not flying high. They were not following a standard flight profile. They were flying less than 100 FT above the ground, deliberately, precisely because at that altitude, radar systems struggle to detect them. It is a technique as old as low-level combat aviation itself. Stay below the radar horizon, stay invisible, get close, hit the target before anyone knows you're there. And it was working. The two aircraft crossed into the edge of Qatari airspace, carrying bombs and guided munitions, visually identified and photographed by sources briefed on the operation. They were not on a reconnaissance mission. They were not a warning. They were inbound, armed and committed. They were 2 minutes away from Al-Udeid Air Base. 2 minutes. And then a Qatari F-15 fighter pilot made a decision. He made the intercept. His wingman followed. The Iranian bombers were engaged and shot down before they could release a single weapon. 2 minutes. That is the margin by which 10,000 American service members at the largest U.S. base in the Middle East were not struck by conventional bombs on day 3 of this conflict. Not a missile defense system, not an American fighter jet, a Qatari pilot flying in defense of a base his country hosts in a war his country did not choose. It was, for the record, the first aerial combat engagement in the entire history of the Qatari Emir Air Force. The pilots who downed those Iranian bombers achieved the first air-to-air kills in Qatari military history. The American press reported it as a notable incident. It was a near catastrophe. But the Su-24 mission was only one part of what Iran had planned for that opening period, because on the very next day, the 3rd of March, an Iranian ballistic missile struck Al-Udeid Air Base. The Qatari Ministry of Defense confirmed it. 2 missiles had been launched from Iranian territory. One was intercepted, one was not. One got through. It penetrated the air defense systems of a base that is supposed to be among the most heavily protected military installations anywhere in the world. The Qatari statement did not specify what was damaged. It noted there were no casualties, which was fortunate, but a ballistic missile had landed inside the perimeter of Al-Udeid. That alone was significant. What happened next was more significant still. Reporting subsequently confirmed that the ANFPS-132 early warning radar located near Al-Udeid at Al Daba had been struck and destroyed in that attack. The ANFPS-132 is not a standard piece of military equipment. It is a $1.1 billion phased array radar system built in the United States capable of tracking ballistic missiles at distances of up to 5,000 kilometers. It feeds critical early warning data into AAD batteries, Patriot systems, and Allied defense networks across the entire Gulf region. When that radar went dark, everything changed. Every American and Allied base in the Gulf suddenly had less warning time for incoming missiles. Every intercept window became shorter. Every defense battery became slightly less effective because the long-range eyes of the entire Gulf air defense architecture had been destroyed. And here is what makes the sequence impossible to dismiss as coincidence. On day 1 of the conflict, THAAD radars in Jordan and the UAE were struck. On day 3, the ANFPS-132 at Al-Udeid was destroyed. In the first 72 hours, Iran had systematically worked through the primary long-range radar coverage across the entire Gulf theater. This was not random targeting. This was a carefully designed counter-surveillance campaign. Blind the defense, then strike freely. And that is exactly what came next. Imagine spending billions of dollars building the most sophisticated missile defense systems on the planet, deploying them across an entire region, positioning them carefully, testing them rigorously, training thousands of personnel to operate them with precision, and then watching them miss. That is not a hypothetical scenario. That is what has been happening across the Gulf for 35 consecutive days. And at the center of that problem sits one weapon and one specific Iranian missile that has quietly rewritten the rules of this conflict in ways that no official statement has been willing to fully acknowledge. Its name is the Khorramshahr-4. To understand why this missile matters, one first has to understand how missile defense systems actually work. When a standard ballistic missile is launched, it follows a predictable path. It rises into the upper atmosphere, arcs over, and descends toward its target along what is known as a ballistic trajectory. The mathematics of that descent are calculable. They are, in fact, highly predictable. And that predictability is the foundation upon which every modern missile defense system is built. The Patriot system tracks an incoming warhead. It calculates where that warhead will be in 3 seconds. It fires an interceptor missile at that precise location. The interceptor meets the warhead midair. The threat is neutralized. THAAD works the same way. Arrow works the same way. David's sling works the same way. They are all in their own sophisticated manner, solving the same mathematical equation. Predict the terminal point, fire the interceptor, make the intercept. It is a system designed around one fundamental assumption that the incoming warhead will go where physics says it should go. The Khorramshahr-4 breaks that assumption. Iran's most advanced domestically produced ballistic missile is equipped with what analysts describe as a maneuverable re-entry vehicle. In simple terms, during the final phase of its descent, the warhead does not follow the predicted ballistic arc. It moves not dramatically, not by hundreds of miles, but by enough to be somewhere other than where the interceptor missile is heading. The defense system fires at the predicted terminal point. The warhead adjusts its trajectory mid-descent. The interceptor arrives at the predicted location and finds nothing. The warhead continues to its target. This is not a theoretical vulnerability being discussed in defense research papers. This is an operational reality that has been playing out above the skies of Qatar, Bahrain, and across the Gulf theater for 35 days. Every Patriot battery, every THAAD installation, every Arrow system deployed in the region is now operating against a weapon specifically engineered to defeat the core logic on which they were designed. And Iran used this weapon against Udeid. But the Khorramshahr-4 did not operate alone. Iran's methodology throughout this conflict has been one of deliberate complexity. In the 57th wave of Operation Truthful Promise 4, launched around the 17th of March, the IRGC combined precision-guided Zulfikar medium-range missiles, liquid fuel claim missiles, and explosive drones into a single coordinated strike package directed at Udeid. Simultaneously, the IRGC Navy conducted a separate joint missile and drone attack against hangars housing American fighter aircraft at Shikisa Air Base in Bahrain and Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE. Multiple weapons, multiple bases, multiple countries, one operational wave. The purpose of this complexity is not random. It is calculated. A defense system that must simultaneously track ballistic missiles with maneuverable warheads, cruise missiles flying at low altitude, and swarms of one-way attack drones across 3 different geographic locations is a defense system being pushed toward its operational limits, and the numbers tell the story with uncomfortable clarity. Iranian missile accuracy has risen to approximately 80%, against a layered defense architecture that was specifically designed to stop 90%. That gap, the 10% difference between design performance and actual performance, represents missiles landing inside bases, radars going dark, infrastructure being destroyed piece by piece. And here is the detail that connects everything: the progressive destruction of Gulf radar systems in the opening 72 hours of the conflict. The very counter-surveillance campaign described in the days before directly correlates with a progressive rise in Iranian strike success rates. Fewer radars, shorter warning times, smaller intercept windows, higher Iranian accuracy. It is not a coincidence. It is cause and effect. It is strategy producing results. And at the center of that strategy, flying its maneuverable warhead through gaps in a blinded defense system, is the Khorramshahr-4. There's a question that has sat quietly beneath 35 days of headlines, beneath every missile alert, every intercepted drone, every official statement carefully worded to avoid saying too much. The question is this: what does Iran actually want from Udeid? Because Iran is not stupid. Iran's military planners understand that ballistic missiles, even Khorramshahr-4 ballistic missiles, are not going to level a base the size of a small city. They are not going to force 10,000 American service members to abandon their posts overnight. They are not going to end Operation Epic Fury with a single decisive strike. Iran knows this, which means the persistent, relentless 35-day campaign against Udeid is not about destruction. It is about something far more calculated. Iran's strategic logic rests on 4 distinct and coherent objectives, each one compounding the others. The first is direct operational degradation. Every Iranian missile that finds its mark inside Udeid's perimeter is a missile that has damaged something: a radar installation, a fuel system, a hangar housing aircraft, a command facility. Each piece of damaged infrastructure is a direct reduction in America's capacity to conduct strikes against Iran: slower sortie rates, reduced surveillance coverage, compromised coordination. The base from which Operation Epic Fury is being run is simultaneously the base being systematically eroded from within by the very conflict it is directing. That is not a coincidence. That is the point. The second objective is political pressure. 10,000 American service members are currently living under conditions that include daily air raid sirens and the sound of explosions. The Stars and Stripes, the publication of the American military itself, has described exactly these conditions at Udeid. Every American casualty at this base is a news story. Every injury is a family notification. Every close call is a question asked in Congress. The administration that launched this conflict with expectations of a short and decisive campaign now finds itself explaining to the American public why the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East is enduring incoming ballistic missiles on a daily basis. Public patience is a strategic resource. Iran is spinning America's down deliberately and methodically, one missile wave at a time. The third objective is Qatar itself. Qatar's position throughout this conflict has been one of the most delicate balancing acts in modern Gulf diplomacy. It is an American treaty ally. It hosts Al Udeid, Its air defenses have intercepted hundreds of Iranian missiles and drones directed at the base. And yet, Qatar has historically maintained careful diplomatic and economic relationships with Iran, relationships it had no desire to sacrifice. Iran targeted that balance directly. Strikes on Roslafen, the heart of Qatar's liquefied natural gas export economy, caused damage now estimated to affect 17% of the country's total production capacity. The projected repair timeline runs 3 to 5 years. That economic attack moved Qatar. Qatar subsequently declared Iranian military and security personnel persona non grata, giving them 24 hours to leave the country, a significant and irreversible diplomatic rupture for a nation that had spent years carefully preserving its relationship with throne. But the underlying Iranian calculation had already achieved its purpose. Qatar is now absorbing the economic and political consequences of hosting American military power in a conflict it did not choose and from which it is deriving no visible benefit. If those costs continue to rise, the question of how long Qatar wishes to continue bearing them will eventually be asked loudly. The fourth objective is perhaps the most strategically significant of all. Iran is not trying to win an air-to-air battle against the United States Air Force. It understands that fight is unwinnable. What it is trying to do methodically, patiently, wave by wave, is erode the infrastructure that makes the American air campaign possible in the first place. Destroy the radars, strike the fuel systems, hit the tankers, target the command centers, exhaust the interceptor stockpiles, force American air defense assets into permanent defensive posture rather than offensive operations. Take away the fuel and the aircraft cannot fly. Take away the radars and the aircraft cannot navigate. Take away the coordination systems and the aircraft cannot organize their strikes. For 30 years, American military doctrine operated on a foundational assumption that its regional bases were sanctuaries. That strikes would go one direction only, that the adversary could absorb American air power without being able to reach back at the infrastructure producing it. That assumption is gone. Iran has reached all Udeid. Iran has hit allowed, and Iran will continue targeting Al Udeid with every missile type, every drone configuration, every coordinated wave it can assemble for as long as this conflict continues. The sanctuary doctrine that defined 3 decades of American military operations in the Gulf has been broken, and it was broken in the Qatari desert, 25 miles southwest of Doha, at a base that the world is only now beginning to understand. This has been the War II signal. Stay informed, stay sharp, and we will see you in the next signal.